My name is Cheryl Richardson. I'm 38 years old. Today I want to tell you about the time my parents laughed when I said I wanted to join their doctor's office. The funny part? They didn't know I was the boss of the whole hospital that was about to buy their business. Sometimes life works in strange ways. If you're watching right now, tell me where you're from in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Stay with me to see how years of my family saying no to me turned into my biggest win at work. Being born into the Richardson family meant everyone expected big things from me. For 3 whole generations, everyone in my family had been doctors. Our last name meant something special in our town. My dad, Dr. James Richardson, was so popular that people waited months just to see him. My mom, Dr. Margaret Richardson, helped bring so many babies into the world that half the kids in our nice neighborhood knew her. From the time I was really small, everyone told me I would be a doctor too. Nobody ever asked me what I wanted. My bedroom didn't have posters of singers or movie stars like other kids. Instead, I had pictures of doctor certificates and body part charts on my walls. While my friends got toys and dolls for their birthdays, my parents gave me pretend doctor kits. "Medicine is in your family, Cheryl," my dad would say at dinner. The Richardson name means you have important jobs to do. Our family dinners felt like being in a classroom. Dad talked about sick people he was helping. Mom shared stories about surgeries. I sat there trying so hard to say smart things that would make them smile at me. But nothing I said ever seemed good enough. My big brother Thomas was different. He was 4 years older than me. Thomas was really good at science and patients liked him when he visited our parents' office in high school. Mom and Dad welcomed him into their world with open arms. They started teaching him how to run the business from the day he started medical school. "Thomas understands what being a Richardson means," my mom would say. When she said this, I knew she meant I didn't understand. Our family's doctor office took up 2 whole floors in a shiny building my grandfather built. Richardson Family Medicine was the fanciest health place in town. It had comfortable waiting rooms, the newest machines, and only rich families came there. When I turned 16, I got a job working at the front desk during summer vacation. I hoped my parents would be proud of how hard I worked. Even though everyone compared me to Thomas all the time, and it hurt, I really did love medicine. I thought it was amazing how science and caring for people came together. I did great in my science classes and helped out at free health clinics. But something felt wrong about doing exactly what my parents did. They only focused on making sick people feel better. I became interested in the bigger picture: how hospitals work, who makes the decisions, and how to run a medical business. In my last year of high school, I spent a day following the person who ran our hospital. It opened my eyes to a whole new world. This was the hidden engine that let doctors like my parents do their jobs. Here were people making choices about hospital supplies, helping more people get care, and coming up with new ideas that helped thousands of patients. This was where I could make my own special mark in medicine, different from my family but still important. I kept these thoughts secret because I knew my parents would say they were silly ideas. Instead, I applied to the schools they picked out. I got into my dad's old college and got ready to follow the path they laid out for me. But a seed of a different dream had been planted in my heart, and soon it would grow into a choice that would break our family apart for many years. Everything changed in my 3rd year of college. After 2.5 years of really hard chemistry classes, biology labs, and test prep, I couldn't ignore my true feelings anymore. I wanted to work in medicine in a different way. One weekend when I came home for spring break, I gathered all my courage. At dinner, I told my family I wanted to study hospital management instead. The quiet that followed was scary. My dad put down his fork very slowly. His face turned red with anger. My mom stared at me like I had just said I was running away to join the circus. "That's not real medicine," my dad finally said. His voice was quiet but scary. "That's just paperwork. Richardsons are healers, not paper pushers." "But Dad," I tried to explain, "hospital managers create the systems that help doctors do their jobs. They help more patients get better care." "Enough," he interrupted, slamming his hand on the table so hard the water glasses shook. "This is because you're not strong enough for medical school, isn't it? You're looking for the easy way out." My mom joined in. Her disappointment hurt even more than Dad's anger. "We've given everything to prepare you for medical school, Cheryl. We've made important connections and gotten you recommendations. Now you want to throw it all away to become some kind of fancy secretary." The argument got worse from there. We said painful things to each other. By the end of that night, my dad made his position very clear. If I gave up on becoming a doctor who treats patients, I would have to pay for school myself. My mom, with tears in her eyes, said I was betraying not just them, but all the Richardsons who came before us. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom. I was surrounded by all the medical books and body charts my parents had given me over the years. I felt more alone than I ever had in my whole life. The next morning, I went back to college early. My decision was made, but my heart was heavy knowing what it would cost me. My parents kept their word. They immediately stopped paying for my college and stopped giving me money to live on. At 20 years old, I suddenly had to get emergency loans and work multiple campus jobs just to survive. My once comfortable college life became a stressful balancing act of work, study, and money worries. Talking to my family became rare and uncomfortable. Holiday visits were tense. We carefully avoided talking about my education or career plans. Thomas, now in his second year of medical school, tried to help fix things between us. But he ultimately agreed with our parents about what a Richardson should be. "They just want what's best for you, Cheryl," he told me on the phone one day. "Maybe you should think about it again. It's not too late to get ready for medical school." But I stayed strong in my belief. I turned my hurt into determination. I changed my major to healthcare management and added business as a second area of study. I threw myself into this new path with everything I had. My grades, which were already good, became excellent. I found myself truly excited about my classes in ways I never was about chemistry or biology. In my last year of college, I was lucky to meet Dr. Eleanor Winters. She was a guest teacher for a class about healthcare innovation. Dr. Winters was everything I wanted to be, a doctor who had moved into hospital management and was now the CEO of several hospitals. After I shared passionate ideas in class about making emergency rooms work better, she asked me to stay after class. "You have a unique way of seeing things, Cheryl," she said, looking at me with interest. "You understand both the doctor side and the business side of healthcare. That's surprisingly rare and incredibly valuable." When I nervously shared my family situation, expecting her to judge me, I instead found understanding and encouragement. Dr. Winters became my mentor. She helped me get a special internship at a local hospital for my last semester. That internship changed everything. For the first time, I was in a place where my ideas about healthcare were valued instead of dismissed. I worked directly with hospital managers who saw potential in my background and perspective. I created my first project to improve quality, a better way to check patients in that reduced emergency room wait times by 22%. As graduation got closer, with no family members planning to come to the ceremony, I found myself at another crossroads. But this time, instead of doubt and fear, I felt growing confidence in the path I had chosen. I was developing my own vision for how healthcare could be better, more efficient, and more focused on patients. And I was determined to make that vision real, with or without the Richardson name behind me. With Dr. Winters as a reference, I got into a really competitive program to get my master's degree in hospital management and business. I worked as a teaching assistant to help pay for it and took out more student loans. I was determined to invest in my future despite the money stress. Every semester, I sent my grades and accomplishments home, hoping for some recognition. But I only got short, formal responses back. I graduated at the top of my class with 2 master's degrees and multiple job offers. Following Dr. Winters' advice, I accepted a job at Memorial Hospital, a big teaching hospital 3 hours from my hometown, as part of their management training program. The 2-year program was designed to prepare future healthcare executives by rotating them through different hospital departments and management roles. I threw myself into each new assignment with both the work ethic my parents had taught me and the innovative thinking they had discouraged. My final training project, redesigning how the hospital scheduled outpatient appointments, caught the attention of the executive team when it reduced missed appointments by 30% and increased revenue by over $2 million in its first year. "You have a gift for seeing both the big picture and the small details," the chief operating officer told me during my evaluation. "You understand how administrative decisions affect patient care, which makes you invaluable." When the training program ended, I was offered a permanent job as director of outpatient services, an unusually high position for someone my age. The next 5 years were a blur of 60-hour work weeks, challenging projects, and steadily increasing responsibilities. I faced resistance from older physicians who didn't like taking direction from a young administrator, especially a woman. But I won them over one by one with results backed by data and genuine respect for their medical expertise. By 30, I had been promoted to Associate Chief Operating Officer, overseeing multiple service lines and hundreds of staff members. By 33, I became the youngest Chief Operating Officer in Memorial Hospital's history. My leadership style combined careful money management with an unwavering focus on quality care and staff well-being, a balance that earned me both respect and results. Throughout this time, I kept minimal contact with my family. They knew I worked in healthcare management, but seemed to deliberately avoid learning specifics about how well my career was going. During rare holiday visits, when asked about my work, I would give vague answers about working at Memorial Hospital. I let them assume I had a middle management job instead of correcting their wrong idea. In my personal life, I stayed very private, putting most of my energy into my career. The few relationships I tried often failed because of my work schedule and emotional walls. My closest friend became Michael Carter, Memorial Hospital's lawyer, who understood the demands of hospital leadership and provided both professional collaboration and genuine friendship. With Michael's legal guidance, I led the hospital's community benefit programs. We established free clinics in poor neighborhoods and developed partnerships with local schools for health education. These programs not only fulfilled legal requirements, but became a source of personal fulfillment. They allowed me to connect healthcare delivery with helping society in ways my parents' practice never had. At 36, when Memorial Hospital's CEO announced his retirement, I was encouraged to apply for the position. The interview process was tough, with presentations to the board and skeptical questions about how young I was. But my track record of financial and quality improvements, combined with my vision for the hospital's future, ultimately won them over. The day I received the official offer to become CEO and Chief Medical Officer of Memorial Hospital was the proudest of my career. I called Michael first, then Dr. Winters, who had remained a mentor throughout my journey. "I always knew you would go far, but even I'm impressed by how fast," Dr. Winters said. "Have you told your family yet?" I hadn't. Despite my professional success, or maybe because of it, the distance between my parents and me had only grown with time. Thomas had joined our parents' practice as planned and was now being prepared to take it over eventually. Our interactions had become perfunctory, obligatory holiday calls and birthday cards. "They still think I made the wrong choice," I told Dr. Winters. "Telling them I'm running a hospital would just feel like I'm trying to prove something." So I kept my achievement to myself, taking charge of Memorial Hospital at 37 years old with a staff of 2,000 and an annual operating budget of $500 million. My first year as CEO brought both challenges and victories, including navigating a difficult computer system implementation and securing a prestigious National Quality Award. It was during a planning meeting with my executive team that my career path would unexpectedly cross with my family history, setting the stage for a confrontation I had never expected. As part of Memorial Hospital's 5-year plan, I had started an aggressive growth strategy that included buying smaller healthcare facilities throughout the region. Our goal was to create an integrated healthcare network that could provide seamless care while achieving cost savings. Jessica Lawson, my trusted Chief Strategy Officer, presented a list of potential acquisition targets during our quarterly planning meeting. "We've identified 15 independent medical practices that align with our growth criteria," she explained as we reviewed the list together. "Most are primary care groups looking for the stability of hospital ownership as the healthcare payment system changes." The irony was almost too perfect. The very skills my parents had dismissed, the administrative and business knowledge they had considered beneath the dignity of a Richardson, were exactly what their practice now desperately needed. I excused myself from the meeting and went back to my office, needing time to process this unexpected development. My first thought was to remove myself from any decisions about Richardson family medicine, to disclose my conflict of interest and step away. But another part of me, the wounded daughter who had been rejected and dismissed, wanted to be directly involved. After careful thought and a long discussion with Michael about the legal and ethical implications, I decided on a middle path. I wouldn't reveal my relationship immediately, but would ensure the acquisition decision was made based entirely on business merit, with extra scrutiny from the board to avoid even the appearance of personal bias. The investigation process revealed even more problems at my parents' practice than initially apparent. Their refusal to adopt modern electronic health records had created inefficiencies throughout their system. Their pay model heavily favored the senior physicians, my parents, at the expense of younger doctors who were leaving at an alarming rate. Their patient satisfaction scores, once the highest in the region, had dropped significantly as they failed to adapt to changing patient expectations. In a painful moment of clarity, I realized that the practice that had been held up as the peak of medical excellence throughout my childhood was now a warning story of what happens when reputation is prioritized over progress. The Richardson way of doing things, which I had been told was the only right way, was now proving unsustainable in a changing healthcare landscape. The acquisition committee ultimately recommended proceeding with an offer for Richardson Family Medicine, citing its strong brand, valuable location, and potential for rapid improvement under proper management. When the recommendation came to me for final approval, I signed off without letting myself think about the personal implications. The next phase would typically involve our integration team handling negotiations and transition planning, but in this case, I made an unusual request. I want to personally lead the integration of Richardson Family Medicine, I told Jessica during our next meeting. She looked surprised. That's several levels below your job, Cheryl. We have an entire team that handles practice acquisitions. This one is special, I said carefully. It has a unique culture and reputation in the community. I want to make sure we preserve what works while fixing the operational issues. What I didn't say was that I needed to be the one to face my parents across the negotiation table. After 15 years of being apart and underestimated, I would finally reveal what I had built while they were dismissing my choices. It would be difficult and emotionally complex, but necessary for both professional and personal closure. As the acquisition process moved forward and a meeting was scheduled with Richardson Family Medicine leadership team, I felt a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. The conference room on the top floor of Memorial Hospital would soon become the setting for a family reunion unlike any other, and a reckoning 15 years in the making. The morning of the meeting with Richardson Family Medicine, I stood in my office bathroom looking at my reflection as I applied lipstick. At 38, I barely looked like the uncertain college student who had last stood up to her parents. My wardrobe of designer suits had replaced the cheap clothes from my financially struggling years. The confidence of running a major hospital had replaced my former need for parental approval. "They won't recognize you," Michael said when he stopped by my office to wish me luck. "Not just how you look, but who you've become." I had told our administrative team not to reveal my name or position to the Richardson representatives ahead of the meeting. The early discussions had been handled by Jessica and our acquisition team, with me referred to only as hospital leadership, who would be present for the final negotiation. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Michael asked. "I could still step in for you." I shook my head. "This is something I need to do myself." As I gathered my materials and headed toward the executive conference room, I felt oddly calm. Years of leading difficult negotiations and high-stakes meetings had prepared me for this moment, even if none had been quite so personal. The Richardson group was already seated when I entered, my parents at the head of the table with Thomas beside them. There were also two younger doctors I didn't recognize, presumably newer partners in the practice. For a brief moment, no one looked up from their papers, giving me a chance to watch them unnoticed. My father had aged considerably. His once dark hair was now completely silver, with deep lines around his mouth and eyes. My mother looked more preserved but tense, her posture rigid as she reviewed documents through reading glasses. Thomas, now 42, had grown to look remarkably like our father, down to the expression of contained impatience. "Good morning," I said as I closed the door behind me. "Thank you all for coming today." 5 heads turned toward me at once. I watched as confusion, then shock registered on my parents' faces. Thomas's mouth actually fell open. The two younger doctors, unaware of the family drama unfolding, merely looked politely attentive. "Cheryl," my mother finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Richardson," I corrected professionally, setting my portfolio on the table. "Chief Medical Officer and Chief Executive Officer of Memorial Hospital." "It's been a while." My father recovered first, his expression shifting from shock to immediate skepticism. "What is this? Some kind of joke? Where's the hospital administrator we're supposed to be meeting with?" "You're looking at her," I replied calmly, taking my seat at the opposite end of the table. "I've been with Memorial for 15 years, the last 18 months as CEO. But today isn't about my career path. We're here to discuss the potential acquisition of Richardson Family Medicine by our hospital network." The younger doctors glanced between us, clearly sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. Thomas looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "This is ridiculous," my father blustered, starting to stand. "We came here for a serious business discussion, not some kind of family ambush." "Dr. Richardson," I said firmly, using his professional title rather than calling him Dad, "this is absolutely a serious business discussion. Your practice has approached our hospital about acquisition, and as CEO, all such decisions ultimately require my approval. Now, shall we proceed professionally, or would you prefer to reschedule when you're feeling more composed?" The subtle power shift was obvious in the room. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one asking for approval in our relationship. My father slowly sat back down, visibly struggling to reconcile his daughter with the executive controlling the fate of his practice. We proceeded through the preliminary discussions with artificial professionalism, reviewing the valuation reports and integration timelines prepared by our teams. I maintained a detached, business-like manner while presenting our analysis of Richardson Family Medicine's strengths and weaknesses. "As you can see from these projections," I explained, pointing to a graph on the screen, "your practice has experienced a 28% decline in new patients over the past 5 years, while operating costs have increased by 35%. Your bill collection cycle is nearly twice the industry standard, and your electronic records implementation is significantly behind schedule." My mother flinched at each point, while my father grew increasingly defensive. "Our practice has provided exceptional care for over 30 years, he interjected. "These business numbers hardly capture the quality of medicine we practice." "On the contrary," I countered, "patient satisfaction scores tell us quite a bit about care quality, and yours have been declining for 6 straight quarters." I slid a report across the table. "What these numbers tell us is that Richardson Family Medicine remains a respected institution with strong potential, but requires significant operational modernization to remain competitive." After 2 hours of detailed discussion, we reached the critical point of the negotiation, the financial terms of the acquisition. "Based on our analysis," I concluded, "Memorial Hospital is prepared to offer the following purchase terms." I outlined a fair but not overly generous offer that reflected the true value of the practice rather than its inflated self-image. The room fell silent as my parents and the other physicians reviewed the numbers. Thomas was the first to speak. "This seems reasonable based on current market conditions," he said cautiously, earning a sharp look from our father. "It's insulting," my father countered. "You're undervaluing decades of reputation and patient goodwill." I remained expressionless. The offer reflects the actual financial performance of the practice, not its historical reputation. However, we do value the Richardson brand and legacy, which is why we're offering to keep the name and current physician leadership for a transitional period. My father scoffed. "A transitional period? So you can eventually push us out of our own practice." "That's standard in acquisitions of this nature," I explained. "But I'd be open to discussing alternatives if you have a counter-proposal." A thought seemed to occur to my father then, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. "Actually, we do have an alternative to consider. Perhaps instead of an outright acquisition, your hospital might consider bringing on a partner who could help modernize our operations while maintaining our independence." I raised an eyebrow, immediately seeing where this was heading. "And who would you suggest for such a role?" My father gestured toward me with affected casualness. "Well, you do seem to have developed some administrative skills. Perhaps you might consider buying into the practice, say, a 20% share to start. You could apply whatever corporate methods you've learned while we maintain clinical control." The audacity was breathtaking. After 15 years of being apart, after dismissing my career choices and cutting me off financially, he was now trying to use our family connection to secure a better deal and avoid the full acquisition. "Are you offering me a position in the family practice, Dr. Richardson?" I asked, my tone deliberately neutral. My father shrugged. "It seems a natural solution. You get to finally join the Richardson medical tradition, and we get your administrative expertise." The slight pause before administrative conveyed all his lingering disdain for my chosen career path. "I see. And what would such a buy-in cost?" He named a figure so inflated it would have been laughable in any context, but in this one it was deeply revealing. He still didn't believe I could afford it. He still saw me as the struggling student he had cut off, not as the successful executive I had become. "That's an interesting proposal," I said, allowing a brief pause. "Unfortunately, I think you misunderstand my position and resources." My father waved dismissively. I realize the buy-in might be beyond your means right now, but perhaps the hospital could fund it as part of your compensation package. The condescension in his tone was the final straw. 15 years of dismissal, underestimation, and emotional distance crystallized into a single moment of clarity. I opened my laptop and pulled up a document I had prepared for this very possibility. Actually, Dr. Richardson, I said calmly, I believe you're operating under several misconceptions. First, as Chief Medical Officer of this hospital, I already have full clinical privileges that far exceed what your practice could offer me. Second, as Chief Executive Officer, I don't need to buy into your practice. I turned the laptop to face him. Memorial Hospital already owns it. I pushed the document toward him. A copy of the preliminary acquisition agreement his practice administrator had signed the previous week. This isn't a negotiation about whether Memorial will acquire Richardson Family Medicine. That decision has already been made by your board. This meeting is merely to discuss transition details and leadership structure moving forward. The blood drained from my father's face as he stared at the document, the reality of the situation finally dawning on him. My mother gasped audibly. Thomas looked between us with wide eyes, witnessing the complete reversal of the power dynamic that had defined our family for decades. As of next month, I continued into the stunned silence, Richardson Family Medicine will become a wholly owned subsidiary of Memorial Hospital. And as CEO, I will have final authority over all operational decisions, including staffing, compensation, and clinical privileges. I closed my laptop with a decisive click that echoed in the silent room. Now, shall we discuss how you'd like to proceed with the transition? The aftermath of that revelation was as dramatic as you might expect. My father stormed out of the conference room, my mother following close behind after throwing me a look of mixed shock and something that might have been reluctant respect. Thomas lingered awkwardly, introducing me to the two younger physicians who were still trying to process the family drama they had just witnessed. Perhaps we should reconvene tomorrow, I suggested to them. This has been a lot to take in for everyone. After they left, Thomas remained, studying me with new eyes. So this is what you've been doing all these years, he said, gesturing to the hospital around us. We thought you were just pushing papers somewhere. I built a career, I replied simply. Just not the one they wanted for me. Are you doing this for revenge? He asked directly. Buying their practice to prove a point? The question gave me pause. Was there an element of vindication in my decision to personally handle this acquisition? Absolutely. But revenge? The acquisition makes sound business sense, I told him honestly. Their reputation still has value, and with proper management, the practice can thrive again. If I were motivated by revenge, I would have let it continue to decline until it collapsed under its own mismanagement. Thomas nodded slowly, seeming to accept this. They won't see it that way, you know. I know, I acknowledged. But that's been our family pattern, hasn't it? They see what they expect to see, not what's actually there. We parted with an awkward half-hug, Thomas promising to talk to our parents and encourage them to approach the situation professionally, if not warmly. The next morning, I was surprised when my assistant announced that my parents were in the lobby requesting to speak with me. I had them shown to a smaller, more private conference room rather than my office, wanting to maintain professional boundaries. They entered looking tired but composed, as if they had spent the night processing the new reality. My father, predictably, spoke first. We've come to discuss terms, he said stiffly. Since it appears we have no choice in this acquisition. There are always choices, I replied. But yes, the acquisition will proceed. The question is whether you want to be part of the new structure or prefer to retire. My mother flinched at the word retire, but my father leaned forward. And if we stay, will you be seeking some sort of retribution for the past? The question echoed Thomas from the day before, but carried the weight of 15 years of estrangement. I took a moment before answering, wanting my words to be precise and truthful. What happened between us was personal, I said carefully. This is business. The changes I'll implement at the practice are the same ones I'd make regardless of who owned it. Electronic health records will be fully implemented. Billing will be centralized. Physician compensation will be restructured to reward quality outcomes, not just volume. I paused, then added, if you're asking whether I'll use my position to punish you, the answer is no. That would be unprofessional and ultimately self-defeating. But I also won't protect outdated practices out of sentimentality or family connection. My mother spoke for the first time. You've changed so much, Cheryl. Become so hardened. I've become effective, I corrected her. I've built something substantial here, something that helps thousands of patients every day. And I did it without the support or belief of the people who should have been my biggest champions. The hurt in my voice must have been evident despite my efforts to remain professional, because something in my mother's expression softened. Perhaps, she said quietly, we were wrong about some things. My father looked as if he might argue, but then surprisingly nodded. Your brother showed us some articles about you last night. Awards you've won, programs you've implemented here. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. They were impressive. It was the closest thing to an apology or admission of error I had ever received from him. And despite everything I felt, a small knot of tension released in my chest. Thank you, I said simply. We spent the next 2 hours discussing the practical aspects of the transition. They had concerns about their long-term patients, their staff, their medical approach. I listened and addressed each point professionally, outlining a transition plan that would preserve what worked while updating what didn't. By the end of our meeting, we had reached a functional working arrangement. They would remain with the practice for 2 years, helping with the transition and gradually reducing their patient loads as they approached retirement. Thomas would stay on as a senior physician, but would also train in administrative skills to potentially take on a leadership role within Memorial Hospital's primary care division. Before they left, my mother hesitated, then asked, "Will you come to dinner sometime? Not to discuss business, just as family?" The question caught me off guard. 15 years of distance couldn't be bridged by one difficult meeting and a tentative professional truce. "I'm not ready for that," I admitted. "Maybe someday, but not yet." She nodded, accepting my boundary with surprising grace. My father looked like he wanted to say something more, but ultimately just extended his hand for a formal handshake, which I returned. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of transition planning. I assigned a dedicated integration team to Richardson Family Medicine, but remained personally involved, reviewing all major decisions. I also made a point of meeting with every staff member individually, from the newest receptionist to the most senior nurse practitioner. Many were shocked to learn I was the Richardson daughter they had heard mentioned but never met, the family black sheep who had supposedly abandoned medicine. I never abandoned medicine, I told one longtime nurse who had known me as a teenager. I just chose to serve it differently. One particularly meaningful interaction came with Dr. David Kim, a young physician who had joined the practice 2 years earlier and was growing increasingly frustrated with its outdated methods. "I was planning to leave," he confessed during our meeting. "The older doctors, your parents, they resist every suggestion for improvement. They keep saying, the Richardson way is the only right way." I smiled at the familiar phrase. "Well, there's about to be a new Richardson way," I told him. "And I'd like you to help shape it." Over the following months, the practice began its transformation. New systems were implemented, workflows redesigned, and the physical space itself renovated to create a more efficient, patient-friendly environment. I visited weekly, sometimes working directly alongside staff to understand their challenges and concerns. My relationship with my parents remained professional, but gradually thawed around the edges. My father, to my surprise, became more receptive to changes once he saw patient satisfaction scores improving. My mother took a particular interest in our community outreach programs, eventually volunteering to lead a women's health initiative for underserved populations. Thomas and I rebuilt our sibling bond, cautiously discovering that we had more in common as adults than we ever had as children. He began to appreciate my administrative skills, while I developed new respect for his clinical expertise. We found ourselves collaborating effectively, combining our different perspectives to improve patient care. The most challenging aspect was navigating the personal undercurrents beneath our professional interactions. Years of hurt, resentment, and misunderstanding couldn't be erased by business success alone. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that emerged in stressful situations, and occasional verbal missteps that reopened old wounds. But there were also moments of genuine connection and mutual respect that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Like when my father asked my opinion on a complex operational issue, genuinely valuing my expertise. Or when my mother proudly introduced me to one of her longtime patients as my daughter, the hospital CEO. Small steps, tentative rebuilding, not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but a pathway toward something new. Something that honored both our shared past and our separate journeys. 1 year after that fateful board meeting, Richardson Family Medicine hosted an open house to celebrate its renovation and expansion under Memorial Hospital ownership. The practice had been transformed, not just physically but operationally, with modern systems, expanded services, and a renewed focus on both patient experience and staff well-being. I stood at the back of the crowded reception area, watching as my father addressed the gathering of staff, patients, and community members. He looked different somehow. The rigid authoritarianism that had defined him throughout my childhood had softened into something more contemplative. For over 30 years, he was saying, I believed there was only one right way to practice medicine, the Richardson way. What I failed to recognize was that the Richardson way could evolve, could expand beyond what I had envisioned. He paused, scanning the room until his eyes met mine. Sometimes it takes a new generation to show us the blind spots in our vision. It was as close to a public acknowledgement of my contribution as he had ever made, and I felt an unexpected tightness in my throat. After the speeches, as guests mingled and toured the renovated facility, my mother approached me with 2 glasses of champagne. Your father may never say it directly, she said, handing me one of the glasses. But he's proud of what you've built. We both are. Even though I never became a doctor, I couldn't help asking. She smiled ruefully. You became exactly what the Richardson legacy needed, Cheryl. We were just too stubborn to see it. Later that evening, I found myself alone in what had once been my father's private office, now transformed into a collaborative workspace for the physician team. Thomas found me there, leaning against the doorframe with a knowing expression. Quite a journey from being told you were too poor to buy into the practice to owning the whole thing, he observed. I laughed softly. That was never the point. Wasn't it? He asked. At least a little bit? I considered the question honestly. Maybe at first, I admitted. That moment in the boardroom, seeing Dad's face when he realized I was in charge, there was definitely some satisfaction there. But that feeling faded quickly. And what replaced it? The understanding that true success isn't about proving others wrong, I said. It's about creating something meaningful despite the obstacles. Every time I focused on showing them they were wrong about me, I gave away my power. Real freedom came when I built something I believed in, regardless of their approval. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking a lot about how different our paths were. I followed the blueprint they created and never questioned it. You forged your own way against tremendous resistance. I wonder sometimes which of us was braver. Different kinds of courage, I suggested, and different kinds of challenges. In the months that followed, my relationship with my parents continued its careful evolution. We weren't the warm, demonstrative family of television movies, probably never would be, but we had found a new equilibrium based on professional respect that was slowly extending into our personal interactions. My father began consulting me on business decisions outside the practice. My mother and I started meeting monthly for lunch, cautiously rebuilding a relationship that had been fractured for so long. Thomas and I became true collaborators, his clinical expertise complementing my administrative vision as we developed new models of care delivery. Perhaps the most meaningful measure of change came when a young administrative intern at the hospital approached me after a leadership seminar I had conducted. Dr. Richardson, she said hesitantly, your father was my mother's physician for years. He told me I should speak with you about my interest in healthcare administration. He said you were the best mentor I could possibly have. The recommendation, so at odds with the father who had once dismissed my career choice as beneath the family dignity, was evidence of a profound transformation, not just in him, but in our entire family dynamic. The journey from rejection to recognition had been long and often painful. There had been no shortcuts, no magical moment of complete reconciliation, just steady work, professional achievement, and the slow rebuilding of trust and respect on both sides. What I learned through this process was that true healing doesn't require forgetting the past or pretending the hurt never happened. It requires building something new that acknowledges both the pain and the growth that came from it. It requires setting boundaries while remaining open to change. And most importantly, it requires finding your own measure of success rather than accepting someone else's definition. The deepest irony of my story is that by rejecting me, my parents set me on the path to becoming exactly what our family legacy needed to survive in a changing healthcare landscape. Had they embraced and supported my vision from the beginning, Richardson Family Medicine might have evolved gradually, adapting to new realities without crisis. Instead, their resistance forced me to build my strength and skills entirely outside their sphere of influence, returning only when I had the power to implement change on my own terms. Today, I balance my role as hospital CEO with ongoing involvement in the practice that bears my family name. We've expanded our community outreach programs, providing care to populations my parents' practice never served. We've created training opportunities for healthcare administrators alongside clinical education, recognizing that modern medicine requires both skill sets working in harmony. Most importantly, I've found peace with my own journey. The need for parental approval that once drove so many of my decisions has been replaced by confidence in my own vision and values. I still carry the Richardson name, but I've redefined what it means on my own terms. If you're watching this and struggling with family expectations that don't align with your authentic path, know that the hardest road often leads to the most meaningful destination. Your value isn't determined by others' recognition of it. Success isn't measured by following someone else's blueprint, but by creating something that reflects your unique gifts and vision. Have you ever had to forge your own path against family expectations? Did it eventually lead to mutual understanding? Or are you still on that journey? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the family rejection that feels like an ending can actually be the beginning of your greatest triumph. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most powerful legacy is the one you define for yourself. Jamal's Revenge.